Good morning, everyone. Again, I am Ana Marie de la Cruz Malyari and I will be your teacher in the subject oral communication. Last time, I sent a module, but I didn't discuss or send a video discussion about definition and process of communication. So, we have to discuss or tackle it. I'm going to discuss before I go forward to the next topic, which is the communication models. Now, what do we mean by communication? What is its definition? But before we discuss about that, I expect that all of you, after going through this module, you can explain the function, the nature, and the process of communication, and examine samples of oral communication activities. What is communication? The word communication is from the Latin word communicare, which means to impart. Communication is defined as an act or process of imparting and sharing information between people in order to express their desires, needs, aspirations, dreams, goals, ideas, thoughts, and all various kinds of information. So, when we say communication, we are communicating. We meant to impart the knowledge or different information. Communication is also a skill that needs to be developed. That's why we are studying oral communication. That's why we have this kind of subject. It is important to acquire good communication skills because this will help in the success of one's career and life in general. We have different dreams in life, right? Now we can apply this communication. To acquire that or to attain that, we have to develop a good communication skills. Now, in other definition and concepts of communication, we have here the various sources like Scrum. It defines communication as a tool that makes societies possible and distinguishes human from other societies. It is right. Why? Through this communication, we can avoid misinterpretation or miscommunication, and it distinguishes us as a human being to other societies because we cannot say that the different animals can use the way how we communicate through the use of language. Berelson and Steiner define communication as the transmission of information, ideas, emotions, skills through the use of symbols, words, pictures, figures, and graphs. Later on, we're going to discuss what are the different kind of communication. Is it just the way how we talk, or can we also apply nonverbal? Later on, we will going to discuss that. Rogers says, communication is the process of transmitting ideas, information, attitudes from the source to a receiver for the purpose of influencing with intent. In the process of communication, there are different parts like sender, the receiver, the message, the content. Later on, we're going to discuss that. Here we have the picture of how the process of communication occurs. Here we have sender, the message, the channel, the receiver, the feedback, and the channel. First, we're going to discuss sender. What is sender? Sender is the one who encodes and dispenses a message to a receiver through a particular channel. The initiator of communication who wishes to convey an idea or concept to others. seek information, or express a thought or emotion. Like what we're doing right now, we are communicating, right? So in this case, I am the sender. I want to convey information or transmit an information towards you, right? Next. Next is message. A communication or what is communicated, any concept or information conveyed. It may include verbal or non-verbal content. As what I said before, there is verbal and non-verbal. The message is the information you want to convey using verbal or non-verbal. Now, there are three dimensions of message. First, element. When you say element, those are ideas presented in the message. What are the ideas? Your thoughts. Structure. How the message is organized. The word by word structure. Next, production. The length and placement of message. Like this one. How does my message occur or in placement? That is production. Channel. The method a sender uses to send a message to a receiver. The most common channels human are auditory and visual. It is also the medium of or instrument used by the sender and the receiver to transmit the information like face-to-face conversation, telephone calls, text messages, email, internet, social media, radio, television, words, pictures, music. Now, this channel is a method of sending a message. We are using Google Classroom as a channel in order to transmit the information towards you. Next, there are dimensions of channel. First, channel credibility. Expertness and trustworthiness of the channel as how the receiver perceives it, like in print media or television. We trust those anchor or broadcaster because of channel credibility. Next, second, channel feedback. How the channel provides a response for the receiver. Channel feedback, if there is transmission or a process of having a feedback, like face-to-face communication. We are not using the channel feedback right now because you don't provide a feedback right now. Next, channel involvement. Participation of the senses in receiving information from the communication, like using our eyes through visual, our hands using our hands like touching. Example of this is face-to-face communication. There is an involvement of senses in receiving information. Number 4, channel availability. Extent and frequency of the availability of a channel for use to a given audience. I cannot see it clearly, so here. Example of this are, in some areas, television and print media may not be available. This channel availability means it is always available. But how if there is a power interruption or no TV channels? So, in some television and print media, channel availability is not available. Channel permanency. Channel's ability to preserve and carry the message. Like print media, it is permanent. Next, channel multiplicable power. Channel multiplicable power is speed and timeliness of a channel in covering areas of communication like mass media. In the news, when we are watching, they cover an areas of information live. So we can receive that message or the information in a short period of time through speed. It's too fast, right? So it's channel multiplicable power. Next, channel complementary. How a channel complements the communicative work of another channel, like mass media and their personal channel. When you say complementary, there is a feedback or complement that we receive. Next, one of the process or a part of process of communication is context. These are the words and sentences in the communication process. These are the words and sentences itself. Next, noise. Anything that interferes in the communication process between the speaker and the audience. This is also called interference. Noise can be external. Later on, we're going to discuss. That is physical sound, or internal, a mental disturbance. And it can disrupt the communication process at any point. Now, what are those external and internal? Physical noise. It is interference that is external to both speaker and listener. It hampers the physical transmission of the signal and message. Physical noise, those are what we can hear or disturbance in our background, like loud party at the neighbors while you're trying to record, loud kids who don't want to take their nap, irritating hum of your computer, air conditioner, or heater. That is physical noise. Right now, I do not know if you can hear the hum of my fan. Next is physiological noise. It is created by barriers within the sender or receiver. A while ago, physical noise, these are the external to both speaker and listener. But here, it is within, a barriers within the receiver and the sender, like articulation problems, mumbling, talking too fast, talking too slow, forgetting to pause, forgetting to breathe. And another example is the distraction caused by hunger, fatigue, headaches, medication, and other factors that affect how we feel and think. That is physiological noise. Next is psychological noise. From the word itself, psycho. It is mental interference in the speaker or listener, like wandering thoughts, preconceived ideas, and sarcasm. Next is semantic noise. Semantic noise is interference created when the speaker and the listener have different meaning system, like word confusion, right? When words themselves are not mutually understood, the receiver might be confused, right? So that is semantic noise. It is the unnecessary technical language. Next is feedback. When you say feedback, it is the response from the receiver, which gives the communicator an idea of how the message being received and whatever it needs to be modified. In communication, especially in face-to-face communication, there is always a feedback. It might be bad or positive feedback. Now there are two kinds of feedback, the positive and the negative. When can we attain or achieve the positive feedback? When? This occurs when the intended message is achieved. It's right. Now, I can receive a positive feedback right now if you can really understood our topic. And negative feedback, it is occurs when the intended message is not achieved. If you can't understand it, of course, there will be a negative feedback. If you mishear the message, you might have a negative feedback because you don't receive the correct information. Next, the receiver. This is the person whom the message is sent. The receiver, or what do we call this one? When we say receiver, I am lost from ID. The receiver is the one who receives the information. Okay, now let's proceed to our next topic, which is the communication models. I'm going to find it on my PC. Here, communication models. After going through this module, you are expected to differentiate the various models of communication. Now we have in your classwork, you have there the activity explore. You're going to illustrate the differences of the following in their ways of communicating. That's 10 points. The leader, secretary, and reporters. It is connected to our topic right now. You're going to realize that later on. Communication models. Language experts believe that communication is systematic and dynamic process and is ever-changing and ever-moving. Communication models are concept of exemplifying the process of human communication. These models attempt to help communicators to obtain a deeper understanding of the whole communication process, thus improving their own communication skills. The following are the models of communication: the linear communication model, interactive model, and transaction model. What are the differences between them? First, linear communication model. It was first presented in 1949 by Shannon and Weaver for Bell Laboratories. Always remember the proponent of that model. This model was designed to show the function of radio and telephone communicators. The main components of these are the sender, the channel, and the receiver. Shannon and Weaver also include noise or interference that distorts understanding between the speaker and the listener. Here we have the figure by Shannon and Weaver model. Now in linear model, we have the sender and the receiver. Now, it is just a one way of communication because the sender transmits message to the receiver without a feedback. Now, there are interferences like noise. Okay? Next one. According to Palma in 1993, linear communication is just a one-way model to communicate with others. There is no feedback which may allow for a continuous exchange of information. Laswell in 1949 described how this model works based on 5 questions. Now, who? Who is who said? Who is the sender? Next is what? What is the message intent to convey? Next is what? In what channel? In what medium? Like, is it used through radio, through telephone? In what channel? To whom? Who is the receiver? And with what effect? What kind of effect? Are you emotional or mad? Yeah, there are different effects. Next model is interactional model. Scrum, the proponent, in 1955 in Wood, 2009, came out with a more interactive model that saw the receiver or listener providing feedback. There is already feedback here to the sender or speaker. There is exchanging messages. The speaker or the sender of the message also listens to the feedback given by the receiver or the listener, but take turns to speak and listen to each other, like in debate. That is an example of interactional model. Face-to-face communication. In the move to a more dynamic view of communication, interaction models follow two channels in which communication and feedback flow between sender and receiver. Feedback is simply a response that a receiver gives to a sender. Later on, let's see the picture. Feedback can be verbal. Using language like say yes. Non-verbal, just a nod or a smile. It's just a gestures using those that is non-verbal. Most importantly, feedback indicates comprehension. If you understood, like as what I said before, in our topic, in process of communication, definition of process of communication, feedback has there are two kinds of feedback, the positive and negative. If you comprehend or understood the message, you will attain or achieve a positive feedback. It can help sender know if their message was received and understood. Now, if you don't understand, there is a negative feedback. By focusing on flow and feedback, interactional models view communication as ongoing process. There is a flow. Now, this is the picture. Interactive model, there are sender, receiver. Sender has a message to the receiver, and the receiver will give a feedback to the sender and vice versa. And that is interactive. There is always a response. Dimension of interactive model. First, the message. What do you want? What is the information? The source. What is the source or the sender? Form. In what form? Verbal, non-verbal. Channel. Is that through the use of technology, or else, or more? Destination, receiver, target, or decoder. This is the receiver, the decoder, who will receive the message. The final feature of this model is the field of experience. The field of experience refers to how environment, experiences, culture, and even heredity can influence how a sender constructs a message. Keep in mind that each person brings a unique field of experience to an interaction. Likewise, each communication interaction is unique. While the interactional model is more dynamic. It is dynamic than the linear model. It is contains some limitation. There is still limitations. For instance, this model implies that while people can be both sender and receiver, they cannot do so simultaneously. In live communication, roles are not quite so clear-cut, and in fact are much more fluid. Next model is transaction model. This model was proposed by D.C. Barnard in 1970, stating that the elements in the communication, speaker and listener, are interdependent and they can receive and send messages simultaneously. This shows that the person in the communication process are connected and engaged in a transaction, um, but they are interdependent. The transactional is most dynamic of communication models. One notable features of this model is the move from referring to people as sender and receivers to referring to people as communicators. This implies that communication is achieved as people both send and receive messages. Later on, we'll see the figure 1.3. Fundamentally, this model views communication as a transaction. In other words, communication is a cooperative action in which communicators co-create the process, outcome, and effectiveness of the interaction. Example of this is call center agent. There is a transaction. Unlike the linear model, which meaning is sent from one person to another, that's all. Also, unlike the interactional model in which understanding is achieved through feedback, there is always a feedback. People create shared meaning in a more dynamic process in the transactional model. There is no constant or permanent sender and receiver. Like what I said in the example, the call center, in call center, the agent and the receiver, she or he is calling a person, and the person there is not constant, it's not permanent, it is changing. And also vice versa, when the people who needs a service call a call center agent, it is not always the same person. This is the example, the communicator, the message and communicator, but it's not permanent. There are noise, the interference there, and with different environment. That is transactional model. According to Wood, 2009, there are three implications in the transactional model. Transactional means that communication is an ongoing and continuously changing process. It's correct, but it's not, the communicator are not constant or not the same at all time. You are changing. The people whom you are communicating are changing as well. And your environment is also continually changing. That's what I said. In any transactional process, each element exists in relation to all other elements. There is this interdependence where there can be no source without a receiver and no message without a source. Each person in the communication process reacts depending on factors such as their background, prior experience, attitudes, cultural beliefs, and self-esteem. The best example is the call center. Now for your assignment, experience, I already attached in our classwork. Like you have illustrated the different ways of communicating of a leader, secretary, and reporters if you are done, which is connected to what you've learned about the three modes of communication. Now, I attach there a chart. Now, fill the table on your assignment experience to complete the comparative chart. That is comparative chart, and that will be 15 points if you did it right. This is my references. So that's all for today. That's all for now. I hope you're going to do all the tasks given, especially that we have to double time everything. We have to discuss fast. We have to, and if you have clarifications or problems, just message me through email. And please cooperate, everybody. Do always do your task. Complete complete what you should complete. And that's all for today. I hope you will have a great day ahead. Goodbye, everyone. Good morning.